Grant McCaslin gets the Red Raiders to the tournament in year one. You know, they lose as a 6 seed to NC State in the first round, but bringing back some key pieces and some super interesting transfers, one of the most underrated transfer classes in the nation, in my opinion. Here with Chris Level, he's the source of all Texas Tech stuff. Christian and Nick here. So, Chris, tell us generally expectations. Are they really high this year for this Texas Tech team? Because I think this is a really good roster, and we know that McCaslin's a great coach.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interest here. I mean, from being in the championship game, 5 years ago, and then obviously the Mark Adams experiment, you go to Sweet 16 in year one, and then it kind of bottomed out in the second year of his tenure. And when Grant got here, everybody, he's a lot of connections with Grant and Texas Tech and Lubbock. And, and I think that people were kind of cautiously optimistic. And I think he exceeded so many of those expectations last year. Toughest league in the country. I don't know if anybody could dispute that. You finished fourth. You were 15-2 at home. And just ran into a buzzsaw at NC State. I mean, in the tournament, it was just like the wrong team, the double-digit seed that you faced there in Pittsburgh, and they go on to the Final Four. But I was curious what he would do with his roster after being through the Big 12 for a year, and just seeing kind of what they wanted to address with it. I think they felt like they needed to be deeper, which they are now, and I think they felt like they need to be a bit longer and more athletic. And I think that they achieved that. There's some questions here, but I think that they addressed a lot of that with what they added. I mean, JT Toppin and Elijah Hawkins are going to top a lot of what people added out there. Maybe not the tops on anybody's list, but certainly amongst the conversation of top transfers that you added based on what they did previously. But yeah, I think expectations are pretty high. I mean, to me, they're a fringe top 25 team with some upside, and I think he's a really good coach. He squeezes a lot out of what he's got always, and I think that is certainly a positive.
Yeah, for sure. I think injuries did crush Texas Tech at certain times last season, and so I can definitely see why McCaslin wanted to just fill out that bench. And this year, now I'm looking at the roster, and I think he has a good 9-10 guys who can get minutes. The starting five will have a lot of new guys meshing together with Federico, Kevin Overton, JT Toppin, Elijah Hawkins, and Darian Williams. Am I correct with that starting five? Or
That's a good question. I think that is something I'm kind of fascinated to see, because if you go with your starting five, that means Chance McMillan and a guy like Kerwin Walton. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. There's a buzz in my office. There's a couple of guys like, Chance McMillan and Kerwin Walton that started games last year that wouldn't be starting. And that speaks to, and then I think Devin Cambridge is a guy that's back that, was a starter before he got hurt. So that's where you get into some of the depth. I do think Elijah Hawkins is your starting point guard. I think Darian Williams is a starter. And I think Federico is really the only true five you have. And then JT Toppin's a starter. Really where it comes down to is, do you want to go big? Do you want to go small? And is that McMillan? Is that Overton? Is that Walton? Is that Cambridge? But that speaks to kind of the versatility of this roster. And I think that's what makes it kind of fun. And I think you could start the season one way, and then you could kind of change as you get into Big 12 play, as you kind of figure out what works best and who's good coming off the bench and all those things. So that's a great question. Overton is a guy I think they're really excited about because he adds a lot of length at that guard spot. He's 6'5", and they felt like they really needed to get longer at the guard spot. I mean, he had Joe Toussaint and Pop Isaacs last year. As tough as those two kids were, and they were smaller. And I think you got picked on a little bit whenever you're trying to switch things on defense and things like that. But I think Overton allows you to protect yourself a bit with some of that length and size.
Overton was awesome at Drake last year. I really enjoyed watching him play. He's a guy that I'm really confident, can make this jump to the Big 12. A couple of McCaslin notes that I had. The three-man we found this stat that every year, all 8 years on three different teams, his preseason KenPom projection for his team, he's always outperformed that. And that's pretty incredible. Another thing is just North Texas obviously hung their hat on the defensive end, and Texas Tech last year was by far his best offensive team he's ever had, which I think speaks to, the doors that are open from being at Texas Tech versus North Texas and Arkansas State, but also his versatility as a coach, right? Like, because if he can get this team to be a top 25 offense and defense, which I think is totally on the table if he gets, the buy-in from everyone defensively, and this could be a really potent team. And then when you speak on the backcourt from last year, Toussaint and especially Pop, a little just chaotic sometimes, right? Like very, very quick, could create a lot off the bounce. And you're right, a little bit undersized. So I definitely think the fit of Hawkins is awesome as a guy who he's a pure point guard, average 6'6" and 7.5 assists, jumping from Howard to the Big Ten, like took better care of the basketball. He was turning the ball over 4 times a game at Howard and got that down to under 3. So I guess, do you think Hawkins is a guy that will be the clear leader of this team as a floor general? I really love the fit of, Williams, Chance, and Walton are really good shooters. I think there's a lot of fun offensive things that can happen with him kind of running the floor with the floor space and with a giant rim runner like Federico kind of rolling to the basket.
I think Hawkins was maybe the most – I don't know if he was the best, but I think he was maybe the most important addition you had in the offseason, because you without him, you lack a pure point guard. And this kid's he's a facilitator. Now, what your concern is he's 5'11", about 170, and you're going against Tamin Lipsey, DeJuan Harris, Jeremy Roach. I mean, it's LJ Cryer. I mean, this league is just a monster. And so he's going to have to step up his level of competition when you start getting into Big 12 play, just in the point guard, mano-a-mano kind of matchup every night. I think if I'm opposing coaches, I wouldn't be surprised if you see people say, we're not leaving these shooters. We're going to see if this kid can be a scoring the ball and like shooting it and penetrating and like, with the floater game or whatever, because you've got, 40% or close type shooters and Kerwin Walton, Chance McMillan, Darian Williams. I mean, you guys mentioned it, list goes on. And this is a guy that looks to get everybody involved. He beats people with the pass. What was it, like 7.5 assists a game last year? One of the top guys in the country. And, teams may try to take that aspect away and say, okay, let's see how good of an offensive player you are without being able to facilitate. But this was the most important. As far as like leader, that's a great question. Joe Toussaint was, I think, unquestionably the alpha on their team last year. He was just tough and played bigger than he was. And just he didn't mind getting knocked to the floor. He'd get up. He'd get in your face. He was the best on-ball defender that they had. And I don't know who that necessarily is now. Chance and Darian are guys that played a ton of minutes, but their personalities they blend in and they're kind of quieter. They don't speak up a lot. So that'll be a really good question to see kind of who emerges. But who's going to have the ball in his hands the most? It's Elijah Hawkins. There's no doubt about that. And I think JT Toppin is maybe your best player. Can he go win you a game? Can you throw it to him at the end of a shot clock and he can create and all that stuff? That's a good question, but he's going to be the best player and I think is a really good fit. But is he the leader? Is he an alpha? That's a good question.
Yeah, a lot of guys that will listen to this podcast probably won't be familiar with JT Toppin right away just because he's only a sophomore. He's from New Mexico. What does he bring to this team year one for him?
Yeah, he's originally from Dallas. I think there's a lot of connections with some of the guys on Texas Tech staff that knew him as a high schooler and all those things. And, he was committed to Texas for a bit. Then he went through the NBA draft process and I think, was one of those guys that you weren't real sure if he was going to be back in college next year. But I think once he just felt real comfortable with the folks at Texas Tech, but I think he adds a ton of versatility. He averaged 12 and 9 last year. And I think his athleticism, I just think I think he can play the 5 if you want to go small. If you want to play big, he can maybe even slide down to the 3. He just runs the floor and he's athletic. He protects the rim a bit. I think 2 blocks a game. And he's got so much upside. And I just knew that this was like, if you were putting a list together of top targets on who you wanted to go after, he probably tops it for them. No pun intended. But I think that's a guy they were thrilled to be able to add to their roster because you can do so many things with it, and he just adds the ability to change your roster so much with where you can play him, and he fits in this league. There's no doubt.
What Toppin is like, to produce at that level of 12-9 in the Mountain West, which is becoming a better league, obviously the March success aside, but his athleticism, and although he didn't shoot a lot of threes, but he can shoot. Like, he shot 34% on unlimited attempts and blocked over what was it?
Yeah, I think it's like 2 a game.
Blocked 2 shots a game, yeah. Mm-hmm. So like, he is exactly what NBA guys like, that mold of a guy that can switch, guard multiple positions, shoot the basketball and have that athleticism at that size. He is an awesome player, and I assume part of the feedback he got from the NBA guys was continue to be able to play as a small ball 5 and shoot that 3 ball. And when I initially brought up the Elijah Hawkins Fede pick and roll, and you made a great point about guys probably will stay a little tighter on shooters and make Hawkins be more of a scorer. But that's what's so great about this roster is you don't have to play that way if you don't want to, because you have a guy like Toppin who can play a small ball 5 with Williams as a 4, and that's where the spacing goes even crazier.
Yeah, and the other piece that I think is interesting, and this was more of an under the radar edition, the Federico edition. He was a 5-5 guy last year, and he's really their one where you have Hawkins being the one pure point. I think Federico, he's more of the one pure 5 man that you have. Can you get more out of him? Can you turn him into an 8-8 guy? I think that they feel like there's more to the way he was used at Pitt, and maybe there's schematically there's some more things they can do with him or squeeze more out of him. Because again, I go back to just the league you're in. I mean, you're going against Hunter Dickinson. I mean, Houston's got grown men down in the paint. And it's on and on every night you just see. And so I think that you need more out of him on what he did to allow Toppin to maybe do some of the things that he would be good at. But the versatility because last year, Devin Cambridge was the small ball 5 before he got hurt. And that's when I think Grant looked at his roster and he's like, you know what? I don't know if we are a lockdown defensive team right now. However, this team can get out and run, and they can run with the best of them, and they did a lot of the time. Now you've got, even Cambridge, I guess, could be a small ball 5 if needed, but because he's a 6'6", runs the floor and a defensive-minded guy and all those things. So just it's very interesting to see kind of what buttons Grant will push. And the other addition to your staff was Jeff Linder. Dave Smart left this staff, and he was kind of orchestrated a lot of the up-tempo offense, and he's now the head coach at Pacific. And so Coach Linder comes in, the head coach at Wyoming. That's what we're seeing in this new realignment NIL era, I guess, where mid-major coaches are going, man, some of these jobs are just really difficult. I'm going to go be a lead assistant and make the same money at a Power 4 school. And that's kind of what Coach Linder did. And he's known Grant for a long time, but I look for him to put his fingerprints on this thing too.
Right. So, Chris, I kind of mentioned you. Kind of mentioned it. That was the best offense in McCasland's career on KenPom last season. It was his 4th worst at 65th since 2020 at Drake. Was that really personnel based? And this season upcoming, do you think he puts more of an emphasis on defense, and we see him, scale back up to like top 25 good?
Coaches are, they have their core beliefs or what they are at their heart or their core. And I think that I don't think he's comfortable with trying to outscore people. I think that he wants to, but you have to score enough points in this league because the coaching and the players are too good that it's unrealistic to think that you're going to hold people to 55 points a night. It's not going to happen. And do they want to be better? Yeah. Statistically, we'll see what that looks like. But that's what he was so frustrated with his kids about back last year in November and December. Is like, guys, if we want to contend in this league, it has to be better defensively. I'm okay with us running and scoring, but we have to be better defensively in the half court, in transition, all those things. And I think there's a few more pieces now And it also allows him to hold guys accountable because he's got more pieces to say, I don't have to play you. If you're going to take possessions off, or if you're not going to keep your guy in front of you, I'm going to let somebody else do it. And you didn't necessarily have that last year, because you mentioned, Nick, about the injuries last year. I mean, Cambridge was out for the majority of the year. Warren Washington missed so much of your of the conference schedule, and even then he was kind of dinged up when he was playing. And those were two of your bigger guys, but you still figured out a way schematically to guard and to be relevant. And finishing fourth in the big league, as injured as you were in the Big 12, I should say, is pretty darn impressive. But you could be sixth or seventh this year and still be a fourth or a fifth seed in the NCAA tournament. That's how good this league could be.
Yeah, it's ridiculous how good
Yeah.
the league is. So talk a little bit more about the backcourt. I love Chance McMillan. I think he's a fantastic player. He kind of is, he thrives like off the ball. So, we talk about how Hawkins is such a pure point guard, but I'm starting to think about who is kind of that secondary playmaker or ball handler. Because I know Williams like I said, Williams can play the four, but he averaged 2.5 assists per game last year. And I'm really high on Overton. I think he can be awesome and fill that role. But Jazz Anderson, Leon Horner, and Christian Anderson, 3 freshmen coming in. Are those guys that could be? Am I mistaken? Is one of those guys a walk on? Or are those guys that could be in the mix this year?
Those are scholarship guys now. I think there was maybe some thought about one of them, but the one name you need to know of that group is Christian Anderson. I mean, I think he's got a chance to actually play some and factor in a little bit. He played on an under 18 Germany team this summer, lit it up overseas. I think he's was committed to Michigan for a long time during the offseason. He's got a chance, I think, to factor in a little bit. But yeah, Darion is a power, what kind of like the point forward, maybe I should say, not power, but point forward, that I think they can put the ball in his hands at times and let him do it. He just got a good, well-rounded game. And it was fun to watch him just figure out the Big 12. Because some of these guys, when you level up and you go from a mid-major to a power forward, sometimes it doesn't work. And I think in this case, he really flourished. Whether it was Grant or whether it was just the way he was being used, he really flourished. He's very versatile, and he plays so much bigger than he is because he's only 6'4", but he you see him and he's 230, and it just feels like he's so much bigger than he really is. But I think Hawkins is and I think, to your point, Chance McMillan, he was a lot more athletic than people give him credit for. They talked about his shooting so much when he came in here, and he was great. But his teams tried to take that away. He would put it on the floor and go dunk it and do some different things. And we started to see glimpses of that, and that was kind of fun because I'm on the broadcast team for the radio for Tech, and so I was at every road game and home and away and all that stuff. And I think he wowed some people with some of that athleticism that you weren't necessarily expecting. So I really got to see him flourish last year.
Well, awesome, man. Well, we're super high on this team. I think Grant McCaslin was a home run hire and a lot of talent and a fun team. I think it's going to be a fun team to watch. So thank you so much for joining us, Chris. And yeah, we'll be really excited to see how this season pans out for Texas Tech.
Christian, Nick, appreciate you taking some time talking some Red Raiders. Happy to join you guys anytime. Good luck to you guys.
Appreciate it.